Rich's approach to Chelsea. I had hoped you might look into the inquiry, but obviously you've got other things to do. Okay, we'll have the next speaker. Can I just say we've heard a number of points being put with great clarity and emphasis, and you may feel that you can associate yourself with those points without repeating them. I appreciate everybody wants to stand up and be counted, and you've taken the trouble to come, and so you want to have your say, and that's fine. But it may not be necessary. You may feel it's not necessary to go over ground that's already been covered. But could we have Alison Parker, please?
My name is Alison Parker, and I live on Woodhouse Road, Brightstown. I have changed it and made it a bit shorter. I would like to say I'm here today for my family and friends. I have lived in my house for over 24 years, where I've been very happy until now. I have 3 children, 2 of which have asthma, so anything that affects the air is of great concern to me. Our air is already very polluted. We have enough to deal with the constant traffic problems with the M60, the traffic centre. On Halloween, we booked to take the children on a spooky tour, only to be stuck in traffic for over 2 hours, which meant we didn't get to go. We have high levels of cancer, to which I've had a few friends treated. I also lost my mother to breast cancer. She was only 54 years of age. Again, anything that's going to impact on this is of great concern to me. I would also like to say, when my friend was being treated, the nurse that came to treat her and give her a counter drugs said she had never been anywhere before where she was treating so many people. This is without the local schools and the children of Trafford, to which there is 56,500. Are they too insignificant to this proposal? I ask you as a mother not to allow this incinerator to go ahead. A child's lungs are very small, so they take on a lot more pollution from our air. Does Trafford really want this huge building on the landscape? As you know, everyone will be able to see clearly. I, for one, won't want to live so near to this plant. My house is under 1 kilometre, which again from information I have read states the first 2 kilometres of people living next to an incinerator are heavily polluted. Who knows what we'll be breathing in on a daily basis? I cannot risk that for my children. This has put a huge amount of stress in our household. The cost of moving, the stress of work, household bills, where to move to. This is so unfair. We know incinerators are not 100% safe. More information is coming out all the time. Toxic chemicals are bad news for the body, and I do not want to be exposed to any more. The decision is yours to make, and I hope you make the right one.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Skinner then, please. Skinner. I've got this.
Yeah,
Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, Mr. Richards, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to read my statement. I'm not going to apologise for repeating anything that's been said before because I haven't had time to preface this, but I'll try not to keep you too long. My name is Peter Skinner. I am a resident of Davyhulme and lived on Shetland Way for 27 years and previously on Stromer Gardens for 13 years. So as you can see, I'm more than qualified in giving an informed opinion of developments in this area over the years and how they have affected the lives of people who live there. When I first moved into Stromer Gardens in the 70s, The only commercial activities were the Cooperative Society complex on Barton Road, comprising of warehousing, car sales, showroom and petrol station, Buxted Chicken Depot, Palmer Scaffolding and, of course, the water treatment plant. The rest of the area from the M60 up to the Barton Dock Road, Duncanton Circle, which in my opinion defines the boundary for Trafford Park, although at this appeal it seems as though the boundaries have been changed, was farmland. There was no industry. The Davyhulme treatment plant has been in this location since the late 19th century, and the area has evolved alongside the plant. At no time until this application do I know of has this area been deemed as industrial or used accordingly. The residents over the years have had many campaigns with United Utilities resolve the matters of obnoxious odours in the atmosphere, and the situation has improved but still isn't perfect. Since the late 90s, obviously the area has changed completely, with the building of the Trafford Centre followed by the demolition of the Co-op warehouse and other businesses mentioned above, and the development of the Trafford Retail Park, followed by, as we all know, the DW Centre, the David Lloyd Centre, golf, driving range, air tunnels, hotels, an office block, and finally that blot on the landscape, the chill factor, which are all on the Trafford side of the canal, and on the Salford side there is the Salford City Stadium. The effect of these developments have been huge in increasing traffic, causing chaos and drastic reduction in air quality. This has greatly affected local residents' ability to move freely around the area by car. In addition, the M60 was widened on both sides of 3 lanes to meet the ever needs of ever-increasing traffic movement through the area. And because of this, it's contributed to it being an air quality managed area. There is also the greater picture that should be considered, which is the effect of the air quality and the increasing traffic in it. That is the development that has been granted planning but as of yet not been built. They are an office block at Junction 10, a large Morrison supermarket on the Trafford Retail Park, a hotel at Junction 9, and as we know, the Trafford Quays development consisting of, I understand, over 3 office blocks and over 200 houses. This is behind Trafford Boulevard, behind the Swinging Bridge pub. All these developments should be taken into account when considering the building of this incinerator in this location. What the above also shows is that it has been Peel as a major developer who's defined the nature and structure of the area, the type of development it has been approved, which have been retail, leisure and commerce. So with this proposal, they are trying to change the makeup of the area with the introduction of this industrial development. Much has been made of the 250-metre distance between an incinerator and the residences, but shouldn't that also apply to the outdoor venues such as the Salford City Stadium, which must fall within this distance? Each week, a number between 4,000 and 10,000 spectators will be exposed to the emissions from this plant. The air quality has deteriorated considerably over 40 years, and no one will convince me that this plant will not greatly add to an already unacceptable level in air quality. My sister-in-law lives on Stromer Gardens, number 29, which is 2 houses in from the slip road south at Junction 10. She won't put out washing to dry due to the dirt particles in the air, and will not open her windows even on hot days due to the noise, the air quality, the dust, the smell and the taste from vehicle exhaust. It is clear that this situation is not going to improve if this plant is approved. I've heard this incinerator is capable of burning 200,000 tonnes of waste wood a year, a figure given to me by the Environment Agency, which seems to be above what is available in the northwest area. I asked the question why Peel would want to build such a plant in this location. Obviously, the close proximity to the canal has something to do with their decision, and I suspect they intend to use this means to ship in fuel from abroad to cover the shortfall and maintain supply. The government guidelines for such a plant, I understand, is based on the use of home-produced waste only to alleviate the amount going to landfill and does not include other countries' waste. If a single word has defined this appeal, it must be insignificant. The Environment Agency used it to describe the effects on air quality. The Primary Care Trust used it with regard to the effects on the public health, and it's been used to describe the effects in traffic on the local road network. But the biggest area this word insignificant can be used is to describe the opinions of the residents of Davyhulme, Flixton and Urmston. More concern was given to plant life in Ince, where the stack height is 85 metres, than has been shown to the welfare of the residents in this area. Inspector, if you, in your report to the Minister of State, advised us the support of this appeal, you were telling him to rubber stamp the opinion that the views of the people of Davyhulme, Flixton and Urmston are insignificant. This plant is neither needed or wanted in Davyhulme, and you should advise the Minister to reject this appeal. Thank you.
Councillor Michael Collins, please. Morning.
Mr. Richards, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to keep this very brief. There are people far better qualified than I am to talk about the technology that is being used and is not being used at this particular site. And there are people who are far better qualified than me to talk about the health effects, etc. And I understand that they've been done in great detail over the last few sessions. So I've changed things around a little bit. I just want to speak to you for a very short period of time. I live in the geographic centre of the residential area of Davyhulme East, which I've represented as elected member of Trafford Council for 10 years. I'm here today to express objections on behalf of residents and my family who live in this ward and surrounding areas of Trafford. I know that residents of Salford have also expressed objections, but I'm not elected to represent their views. Davyhulme East does include a small part of Trafford Park, the Trafford Centre and the leisure facilities located to the west of that shopping centre. The area in which the Trafford Centre and adjoining leisure facilities are located is correctly known as Dumplington, though for some strange reason Peel seem to abhor this name and refuse to use it. Barton is an area on the Salford side of the Manchester Ship Canal, and you would imagine the Peel group of companies would know this, as they also own the canal and much of the adjoining land along its length. The very first word of Peel's name for this incinerator is therefore incorrect, and I suspect another deliberate attempt to mislead. In fact, 2 years ago I was invited to look at a proposed site with my colleagues from the adjoining ward of Davyhulme West, and it was then that I clearly stated to Mike England of Peel that my major concern was what was going to come out of the chimney and what was going to come out of the ash at the bottom. Both would clearly be highly toxic. Since then there has been nothing to alleviate my concerns. The material being burnt is not biomass, which on the face of it sounds green or environmentally friendly, but there will be 5 to 10% other material, plus that imported, which will consist of unknown treatments. This is clearly not the right area. In fact, I would find it hard to find the right area for an incinerator as unwanted by residents as this. The site is currently a wildlife corridor, though Peel offhandedly have stated that they will divert this. They clearly treat animals with the same offhand attitudes as objections from people. Residents who recently purchased properties along Broadway in Davyhulme now regret their choice, as they were unaware of the impending doom this incinerator brings. These properties were sold with 95% mortgages, which at the time were extremely difficult to obtain. In other parts of Davyhulme, residents are already selling and moving away, such as the fear and the perception of airborne pollution. During the course of my work as a councillor, I knock on doors several times per month around my area. The most common issue that's burning into everybody's memory is the fear of this plant. I have found no more than 6 people actually in favour, and yet I could list hundreds and hundreds of thousands who are against this plant. Mr. Richards, I hope that localism does actually work in this particular case, at least partly. I will not go into detail about the stack height, as I know that has already been detailed by those far more qualified than me. Suffice it to say that it is only lower because of the airport, and it's not at this unique height because it is safe. There is clearly a risk of explosion at this incinerator, as has happened at other sites. I cannot imagine what would happen to our environment then. You'll be aware that last Friday there was a leak from a chemical plant in Trafford Park, and people were told to stay indoors and keep the windows and doors shut. What would happen if something went wrong with this site, I just don't want to imagine. There is no confidence in the Environment Agency as, just to detail a few points, they took no notes during their public consultation events, they consider traffic pollution to be beyond their remit, they give 4 months notice of inspections, and have never rescinded a permit even when conditions have been broken. The prime reasons for objection are those of health, and those who put profit first, or aid those who do so and put ordinary lives at risk, should be ashamed of themselves. I'm not going to detail the health risks, as I say, they've already been detailed enough, I feel. Mr. Richards, Trafford's planning committee refused permission. Trafford Council tried to debate, but not one member spoke in favour of the incinerator. All 3 of Trafford's MPs and our locally based MEP object to this incinerator. Old, polluting technology like this is not wanted. Please do the right thing and support the objectors. Thank you.
Mr. Richards. I'm just going to experiment with a microphone and hope you can hear me. My name is Peter Gilbert and I'm chairman of the Breathe Clean Air Group. I'm a retired health and safety officer, and at the time of my retirement in 2005 I was a chartered fellow of the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health. Can you hear okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. I wish to oppose the building and operation of the Barton Renewable Energy Plant on the following grounds. Health impacts of burning waste wood and solid recovered fuel. Environmental impacts of noise, odour and visual impact. Climate change impacts of producing masses of carbon dioxide. Substandard technology, as this plant is not using best available techniques and has made no provision for using the heat produced, and the danger of fire and explosion. As it is foreseeable that supplies of waste wood will run out in the future due to improvements in recycling, Brett will have to burn trees or pellets. Therefore, I oppose on grounds of protecting the world's forests. Health. And I've cut this down somewhat, but I'll just mention some of my concerns. Particulate matter. It is regrettable and quite frankly scandalous that the Environment Agency, the Health Protection Agency and the primary care trusts have not recognised and accepted that burning wood, brackets, whether virgin trees or waste wood from industry and commerce, close brackets, produces very fine particulate matter known as PM1 and nanoparticles, and these particles cause ill health, disease and death. It is also scandalous that consultants who advised Trafford Council and Salford City Council prior to the planning committee meetings failed to advise the respective councils on the dangers of PM1 particulates and nanoparticle emissions when burning wood and biomass products. There are many studies, particularly from the USA, that have associated ill health and death with fine particulate matter. The US Environmental Protection Agency has declared particle pollution especially fine particles, contain microscopic solids and liquid droplets that are so small that they can get deep into the lungs and cause serious health problems. And I'll just mention a few of the American institutions that have reiterated these sentiments of very small particulates that are very damaging. The Massachusetts Medical Society, Hampshire Medical Society, Physicians for Social Responsibility, the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the Massachusetts Environmental Energy Alliance. I'll not say what they said. I've got them from Mr. Richards, but I think most people know what's been said. Concerning dioxins, I won't talk about dioxins, the technical stuff, because I want to try and save some time, and I think you already know. But I must say that of great concern to me is that one of Peel Energy's partners, a company named Covanta, has violated US limits over dioxin releases many times. In 2007 at Wallingford, Connecticut, Covanta was fined for exceeding the dioxin/furan emission limits. In 2008 at Oklahoma, Florida, Covanta was fined $11,000 for excessive dioxin and furan emissions. Also in 2008 at Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Covanta was cited for exceeding the limit for dioxin and furan by 350%, and also fined $7,653 for failing to report other violations. In 2011, in Butte County, California, Covanta was responsible for depositing 19,000 tons of fly ash containing elevated levels of dioxin on an open landfill site. And in July this year, at Wallingford, Connecticut, again, Energy from Waste plant, Covanta was fined $400,000 for dioxin emission violations. If this were to occur in the UK, it would not conform to the belief that modern, well-managed incinerators are not a significant risk to public health, would it? Because of the risk of dioxin emissions, Brett should not be built. I've got a portion here on heavy metals, but I think that's been covered adequately by Dr. Raber. Certainly on chromium, there's also effects of the arsenic and lead from lead paint that affects the central nervous system and can be fatal, and that can be arrive at the plant from demolition waste from old lead paint. Environmental impacts. There will be a constant hum from fans, electric motors, conveyor belts, and the electricity generator itself. This noise may not be perceptible during the day, but will be an irritating nuisance noise during the evening and at night time when people are trying to sleep. There will also be the noise of traffic movements and loading operations from the plant. Odour could also be a problem, particularly if the waste material is wet and has to be dried out on site. The visual impact will be horrendous. The artist's impression, which is constantly seen in the local newspapers, is not to scale. It is about half the height that it should be. Peel Energy refused to issue height dimensions until recently, when it was revealed that the height would be 42 metres. This is higher than the Barton High Level motorway bridge and will dominate the local landscape. Climate change. According to the Massachusetts Forest Watch, burning biomass produces more of the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide per unit of energy than burning of fossil fuels. Wood-fueled biomass plants emit 50% more carbon dioxide than existing coal plants and 330% more carbon dioxide than new natural gas plants. If trees are burnt at BREP in the future, the world is losing the very thing that captures carbon dioxide and produces oxygen. It takes less than an hour to burn a tree and at least 20 years to grow one. There will be a carbon imbalance for generations. For the benefit of the planet, BREP appeal must be refused. 5. BREP not using best available techniques. On Wednesday, Mr. Othen said that plasma gasification was a better technique than the open grate boiler to be used at BREP. He intimated that the BREP system was adequate, but it would appear that is not the best available technology. No mention was made of the outdated back filtration system to be used, and there certainly won't be any scrubbers or electrostatic precipitation. The claims that back filtration will capture 99.995% of particles is unrealistic, but it is the finest particulates that will not be captured efficiently, and they are the most dangerous. I've got something about the chimney stack, but I'm not going to mention that, it's already been said. It has been reported during the inquiry that the heat produced from the proposed plant, is not going to be used to heat buildings, which will reduce the overall efficiency of the plant. This indicates that the heat could be used for perhaps drying waste, possibly old landfill waste, which is too wet to burn. This would create an unreasonable odour problem for local people. Excuse me. Danger of fire and explosion. There have been a number of fires and explosions at biomass plants recently, contradicting the phrase modern, well-managed incinerators pose an insignificant risk to the community. In February this year, a huge fire engulfed the biomass plant's power station at Tilbury in Essex. More than 120 firefighters tackled the blaze, which started in a storage area containing about 4,000 tonnes of wood pellets. In August this year, more than 200 firefighters and 40 fire engines were sent to a fire at Hunt's Waste Recycling Centre in Dagenham, East London, where a plant the size of a football field was ablaze. In July 2011, a huge fire burned for 5 weeks at Rio Recycling at Orsett, Essex. The smoke and fumes from 40,000 tonnes of recycled wood, groups of wood chip, caused illness and distress amongst the neighbourhood, and some are taking legal action against the company. In February this year, approximately 500 tonnes of recycled timber being stored for biofuel caught fire at Chilton near Didcot in Oxfordshire. In October 2011, a 200-tonne stockpile of wood pellets spontaneously set alight at Port of Tyne, South Shields. It took more than 30 firefighters to bring it under control. Although the storage facility had heat monitoring systems in place, the deep-seated fire was not detected until it was well alight. In September this year, at Stanton by Dale, Derbyshire, a fire in 8,000 tonnes of recycled wood burnt for 8 weeks. Thick black smoke drifted across the M1 motorway. Residents were told to keep their windows and doors closed and to keep children with respiratory problems indoors. This month, a huge explosion ripped through Europe's first biomass power plant at Nijmegen in the Netherlands. The 590 megawatt power station uses 470,000 tonnes of wood pellets per year. In May 2007, a fire at a biomass plant in Sittard, also in the Netherlands, caused a massive wood dust explosion. And just this week, at Sonne Novaboard in South Africa, a wood dust explosion in the plant's wood dust filter exploded, followed by a 50-metre high flame. The risk of fire and explosion is another sound reason to reject the building of the Barton renewable energy plant. In conclusion, I would like to finish by referring to an item that was raised yesterday during the cross-examination of Mr. Singleton regarding the Bolton Incinerator. And Mr. Cunnington mentioned this as well. The Bolton News of the 11th of June, and I've attached this for reference, reported that the HBA was to undertake a 2-year study into infant deaths and deformity. Figures from the Office of National Statistics show a jump in infant deaths in Great Lever, where the Bolton Incinerator is located. Official figures show that 11.3 babies die per 1,000 live births in Great Lever, more than double the Bolton Borough average of 5.3. The lowest rate in Bolton is 2.3. I urge the Inspector to reject the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you very much. Mr. Black? Morning. Yeah, there it is. I just looked at the numbers of speakers and I happen to be number 13. Let's hope I'm not unlucky. My name is Michael Black. I live at 54 Benbeckhill Way in Davyhulme, and I speak on behalf of myself and my family. I have lived within 2 miles of the proposed development for my whole life. I have witnessed changes for both the good and the not so good. My grandparents were, and my parents are still, residents of Urmston from just before my birth in 1960. Although my maternal grandparents briefly moved away to run a business in Gorton, East Manchester, they returned, moving to a Grade 2 listed building, a cottage on Davyhulme Road in 1976. My grandfather also served as a councillor on Urmston Urban District Council for a number of years. This day, I should note, my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, would indeed have been 100 years old. Now, why do I mention my forebears? Well, they moved to and lived in this district because they found it to be most agreeable. They served and continue to offer service to the residents of this area. I have a young family who are happy to live and have many friends in and around Urmston. I have a right to breathe unpolluted air without let or hindrance, or to have years of healthy life expectancy without artificially inflated risk of infection, disease, or significant injury. I understand that I live in or close to an area where EU legislation on safe levels of certain toxic emissions are being breached. Now, I'm gravely worried about the health impact of this BREP plant, losing sleep on many occasions to the extent that I plan to move away from my home if it goes ahead, as do other members of my family. The science is at best contradictory. The public have no faith in the pollution control regime, also known as the Environment Agency. The technology is questionable. We've gone over chimney height. The fact that the appellant has called it Barton is ridiculous. It's a marketing ploy. This is in Davyhulme. Why have you not called it the Davyhulme Incinerator?
I do not want this plant, whatever they choose to call it. I believe it to be the wrong technology, in the wrong place, at the wrong time. I am given to understand that there will be a storage facility for wood products capable of holding 20,000 tonnes. Let us suppose that each of these tonnes will use more than 1 cubic metre of volume. If this storage area were 1 cube, with a bit of a lip to stop things spilling over, it would be at least 28 metres or 92 feet in all directions. Add this to the fact that fire can occur when such material is wetted, it acts like a compost heap, or when it is bone dry and generating dust. It has not escaped my notice that the fire service in the local area has been or is due to be significantly reduced in capacity. Now, how about the shelf of this incinerator? It is capable of accommodating a much larger machine than currently planned. So I wonder what's being planned at some time in the future. The importing of more noxious waste, as other existing installations begin to fail perhaps? This supposition is not far from the front of my mind. Now, dioxins are toxic. They form in favourable conditions when chlorine atoms are mixed with oxygen, carbon and hydrogen inside incinerators operating at less than 1,000 degrees centigrade. Chlorine can be present in many forms, particularly within the plastics molecules found in the solid recovered fuel component, which the appellant states will be around 5%. As for the waste wood from demolition and the like, nobody actually knows what this will be contaminated with. And as such, it poses significant risk. A high-temperature incinerator in Cheshire runs at 1,200 degrees centigrade. It is a total destruction facility which doesn't generate electricity as a byproduct, consequent to its general operating temperature. Boilers, I am given to understand, require a much lower temperature in order to function. Consequently, the prospect of dioxin formation is greatly enhanced. The high-temperature incinerator is subject to ultra-rapid cooling ahead of the stack, thereby preventing dioxin formation. A common feature of such waste facilities is that there is a smell which lingers. How does it do that? The same way a bacon sandwich does. Microparticulate matter is suspended in the air and breathed in. It beggars belief that statements can be made concerning air quality when the measurements are made outside the area and are not current. How can these be reliable? How can an informed judgment be made upon data gleaned from receptors which are not close to the site, i.e. Glazebrook and Wythenshawe? How can the appellant dismiss out of hand the findings presented by the Breathe Clean Air Group on the notion that the measurements do not reflect a full data set, when they then intend to rely on data obtained from the green box on Stromer Gardens, which has only been operating for a handful of months? Now, no true analysis is ever completely, adequately serviceable without control data. Where is it then? I am not able to report to any level of certainty if I do not perform quality control standards and register the facts pertaining to the analysis on site. There's a bottle. On the outside of it, it says Volvic. Okay? Somewhere on it, in very, very small writing, is a certificate of analysis. I've not opened that bottle. It could be anything. I could have resealed it. But I have not. I know it's water. And I'm going to drink some because my mouth's getting dry. Now then, we don't know until we open it. I suggest that there's plenty of analysis that has not taken place. Now, if I'd done this, I'm a scientist, I'm an analytical chemist. If I'd done analysis without opening the bottle, or even attempting to find out what was in it, I would be guilty of something which we commonly know as gross misconduct, and get something equally nasty called the sack. We live in and around and adjacent to an air quality management area. BREP is proposed to be sited on the edge thereof, with the prevailing wind direction propelling any emanation from it into this already overloaded area. This will be the straw which breaks that camel's back. I don't trust modelling. If I go and buy a jacket from somewhere like Burton's, I'm not measured for it. It's on a peg. If it doesn't fit, it's tough. So, modelling. There are so many questions that have been raised, and there seems to be a considerable lack of data, which I would deem to be crucial to accurate modelling, such as existing background levels of emissions. Now, I went for a scout round all the documentation that I've seen on this, and I put a simple word search in. I looked for certificates, calibration, and quality. No certificates of calibration have been submitted for the purpose of authentication, validation, or confirmation of the data derived and subsequently used to build or substantiate the appellant's case. Quality assurance data. No quality assurance data is present for the purpose of authentication, validation, or confirmation of the data derived. I have also been made aware that the EA have granted a permit and that the appellant has been making hay with this fact, even to the point of its possible inclusion in evidence. This, quite simply, is not evidence and should not be treated as such. The EA were bound to grant a permit, especially given they have never apparently refused one before. However, the EA themselves have stated that it is highly irregular to grant a permit before the public inquiry. So why has this been done in the instance of PrEP? I, and many of us, are highly suspicious of this, especially as the EA has previously described Peel as, quote, a valued customer. So, how do I feel? I don't want this here. We don't want this here. The Mersey Basin is already a hotspot for respiratory diseases. The risks have not been properly assessed. People genuinely fear for their well-being and future, and for those in our community unable to cope with an additional health burden caused by this plant. The threat of this plant and the attendant worry or anxiety it has already and will continue to cause. It is little wonder, therefore, that we, as a community, have made such a monumental stand against the Barton Renewable Energy Plant. We require our voices to be heard. The laws of this land are enacted by the few on behalf of the many, and the obverse should be upheld as true. Our worries and our voices should be sufficient to cause a reversal of the situation we now face, especially in light of the government's well-publicised drive towards localism. This place we call home is hardly likely to thrive if its population is caused to diminish on the back of this unfortunate development. People will not move here to avail themselves of our excellent education facilities. The bottom line is that this proposed development will cause more problems than it will solve, will not be a significant employer, will not create local wealth, but will instead inflict immeasurable misery upon those within its range of influence, putting health and lives in considerably enhanced danger. People will not move here to avail themselves, especially when there's a dead marketplace that will affect business. I love Urmston. It is the place of my birth, and I want it to remain as a desirable place to live in perpetuity. My request to you, therefore, Mr. Inspector, is that you recommend to the Secretary of State that this appeal be dismissed. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, perhaps.
Good afternoon. I must say I feel a bit intimidated because I just feel I'm one of a normal person, and I'm not much of a public speaker. So please bear with me if I have to follow all these eminent people. My name is Anke Raab, and I've been living in Flixton for 12 years. Like so many others, I just want to be able to live in peace, and I'm not somebody who likes to speak in public. However, what I've heard and seen about this proposed incinerator has upset me so much that I've decided that I cannot just stay silent. I would like to express my serious concerns about the proposed incinerator, REP. This is a completely wrong proposal for this area and the people living near to it. Sorry. The people here already have enough problems from the traffic on the M60, compounded by the increasing plans by Peel Holdings. Peel Holdings should be glad that although we may not like these plans, we usually give things the benefit of the doubt and do not argue much about the planned buildings, hotel and conference centre, although they will make our lives that bit more difficult. But an incinerator like this, that is different. This is more than a step too far. This will make our lives more miserable, and we are worried. Very, very worried. Sorry.
Don't need to apologise.
Just take your time.
We are worried about the toxic emissions from the incinerator, especially as there will be no clear and effective controls and emissions in place. You may remember the incident in Trafford Park last Friday when there was a chemical leak and we were advised to stay inside and keep the windows closed.
Do you just want to take a
Sorry.
break? Yeah.
Sorry.
It's fine. Plenty of time. Take your time.
This is not the first time an incident like this has happened in Trafford Park, but at least it is usually a clearly defined and relatively short-term event, and in a dedicated industrial estate not close to people's homes like this. With this incinerator, there is a risk that there is continual pollution with dangerous substances. Although it may be at low levels, but it all adds up over time and in our bodies. One of the problems is that we would not even know and would probably not be informed if it reached harmful levels because the appropriate controls and checks are not in place. Or are we expected to keep our windows closed all the time? The experts may argue about the levels and effects of the substances blown out by this incinerator. There were a number of experts in the past who told people that cigarette smoking is harmless. We now know better, and now you won't find many saying that. Also, we know that these so-called experts can get it wrong, and people might even die in an earthquake, but experts, in inverted commas, had reassured them they would be safe. People make mistakes, and experts may learn only after a long time that they have been wrong. But in the meantime, it is other people, not the experts, that have suffered the consequences. When people's lives are potentially in danger, the better safe than sorry approach should be applied here. In addition to the direct health effects from this energy plant, whatever it is, which experts may argue about, what about the health effects from worrying and anxiety? Since I have become aware of the appeal by Peel Holding against the refusal by the Council, I have not been sleeping well, and I'm sure there's a large number of people who respond similarly to perceived threats to their lives. I have also not been enjoying my garden much, considering the potential future pollution of it, although it usually lifts my spirit and keeps me going when things are difficult. I wonder whether we will be seeing more people with depression and other illnesses brought on by anxiety in this area, if this incinerator is built at Barton, so close to Davyhulme. Thank you. The people of Elmston have been suffering under Peel Holdings projects with the associated traffic implications and pollution for a long time, and we have been tolerating it. But this goes too far. Is there no end to Peel Holdings' greed? They don't seem to care about people. They only seem to care about money. They completely ignore the concerns of the local population. They have a very good legal team arguing their case, but that does not make them right. Indeed, one gets the impression that they managed to make black look white or a dirty incinerator look clean. This incinerator will pose a serious threat to people's health and well-being. Listening to some of the remarks from the inquiry when I was here last week, I got the impression that there is an arrangement or something to ignore the local people's health concerns. I am sure people would like to know if there has been any such directive. Extensive evidence to suggest severe potential implication on people's health and well-being has already been presented to the inquiry and has been discussed at length. There is also a threat to people's livelihood in the area. We all know, and I'm sure that even the team of Peel Holdings and the inspector will know, that if something like this is being built, sorry, thanks. Make a right fool of myself here. Sorry, so we all know, and I'm sure that even the team of Peel Holdings and the inspector will know, that if something like this is being built in an area, people will not want to move to the area, and indeed people who live in the area will want to move away. But it may well be that because house prices will fall, we might not be able to afford to move, and so some will stay, but their lives that much more unhappy. I've been thinking of moving away myself. Last week, Mr. Kingston tried to present the absence of any perceptible effects on investors in housing projects so far to mean positive evidence this is not the case. This is wrong. There is no such thing as positive evidence that something is not there. One can at most say that there is no evidence for it. And this is in part because maybe you may have not looked closely enough for it. If this was proposed in your area, you would probably be concerned as well, and you would certainly anticipate house prices to fall should this go ahead. It doesn't need, sorry, I'm not written this down, but it doesn't need to be argued by studies, because we all know it is like that. After I had been relieved to hear that the application for this incinerator had been refused by Trafford Council, I have been so incensed by Peel Holdings' appeal and the threat that this will be forced through on a technicality that I decided to speak, although I'd usually rather not. I would prefer my peace and quiet and hope that it will all go away. But I realize that if the people of this area do not speak out now, we will regret it, possibly for the rest of our lives. I would be very concerned about the democratic process if this is pushed through against the will of the democratically elected council and against the will of the people. And so many residents of this area, who by and large, as Mr. Kingston enlightened us last week, are hardworking, contributing to society, we usually trust the democratic structures to protect us from serious harm. We therefore do not usually comment on everything that happens, and in principle we still trust our elected representatives to make reasonable decisions that do not cause harm to us. It is only when our livelihoods and our very lives are threatened that we feel that we have to speak out. And the proposed incinerator is going too far. Enough is enough. It is a disgrace that Peel Holdings still wants to force this through when there is such a clear decision by the council and a considerable public opinion of his opposition to this proposal. What is the state of democracy in this country? If people's will and the democratic process are to be ignored, then there is no wonder that people think there is no point even to vote. I appeal to you that democracy and common sense will prevail, and the people of Davyhulme, Flixton and Urmston and the surrounding areas will be protected from the effects of such an incinerator. Do not put profit for Peel Holding before the lives and health of people, and therefore I ask you to reject this appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Kelly Barrett, please. Hello.
Hello, my name is Kelly Barrett. I'm a local resident and I also have business in Urmston. I live in Stratford. I know most of the areas that have been mentioned have been Urmston, Flixton, Davyhulme. I'd like to make the point that having lived in Stretford for over 20 years. Virtually everybody that I know who lives in Stretford is equally as concerned about this proposal and very much against this going ahead. My main concerns are, which obviously I won't spend too much time going over because they have been covered in great depth. I'm not an expert, so I want to just give my points of view as a parent, a resident and a business person. Again, as other people have said, I'd just like to reiterate, I think it's an extremely bad choice of location for all the reasons that have been discussed. Densely populated, it's already an industrial area, the traffic congestion, the motorway, the traffic centre, all leading to already very poor air quality. The health impacts, I know that respiratory disease is the third cause of death in Trafford. I have members of my own family who suffer with asthma. My brother-in-law lives in Flixton. His main hobby is running. He's also quite a severe asthmatic and has on occasions had to be hospitalised with asthma. So obviously any decrease in air quality is going to be a major concern to my family. I also have nieces and nephews who have quite severe asthma, and despite the fact that their parents are health workers themselves, have on occasions had to take their children to A&E and have them admitted to hospital overnight. And at a time when our A&E department at Trafford is also being under threat, I feel very concerned that people who do suffer with asthma, should they have an asthma attack, are going to be in even more danger because they're going to have to travel a lot further to get medical help. I've got 3 daughters. They're aged 5, 8 and 10 at the moment. And one of the reasons that we like living in Trafford so much is the proximity to the meadows. And we spend an awful lot of time on the meadows. Got lots of happy photographs of my children playing on meadows. And if Brett goes ahead, that's something that I think will be taken away from us. We won't like spending as much time in the open air because we'll be worried about the air quality. I think that will be a similar story for an awful lot of families. I was very concerned to hear last week an expert talking about birth defects being caused by poor air quality in proximity to incinerators like Brep. I feel that not only is our immediate future being threatened, but also going generations ahead. When my 3 daughters are older, I will be extremely concerned at the time when the time comes for them to start their own families. So this is something that will have an impact on the people of this area for many, many years if it goes ahead. It's not something that is going to go away. For 25 years, we'll be living with these worries and these concerns. I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I last year started my own tuition centre in Ermston. So I've got lots and lots of contact with children. One of the things that I have witnessed in my time as a teacher is how asthma is a disease which can lead to children having a very inconsistent progress in their education. They tend to miss odd days here and there, or even longer lengths of time off school. Very often children, when they have problems later on in their educational career, when we look back, quite often they've got problems like asthma, and they've missed chunks of their education in the early years, and then it leads to them having problems in later life with their education. At the moment, Trafford's renowned for its good schools. Lots of people like to move here because of the schools. Again, I think that there's going to be a massive detrimental effect on the schools in this area because, as we've discussed, many people are already considering moving away. Clearly, it's a bad thing for everybody in Trafford, but particularly for people like me who work in private tuition. Just from a business point of view, that's obviously going to have a big impact on us. And I know from speaking to parents, not only am I a tutor, I also run a Brownies unit, so I'm quite heavily involved in girl guiding. I've not yet spoken to one parent who has any support whatsoever for this, and I think it is a major, major concern to anybody with children in this area. So, just to conclude, I've got very, very grave reservations about this. I'll be very upset if it goes ahead. And like many other people, it is something that will make me consider leaving the area, despite having lived here for over 20 years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
name's Sue Brett, and like the other lady who spoke before, I'm not used to speaking in public either. The reason I'm doing it is because I'm so against the incinerator. I live in Davyhulme with my two children, they're aged 13 and 11. I've lived in the area since 1991. My children both run for a local running club, I run, and my son plays on a local football team. Both myself and my son suffer from asthma. We live just a half a mile away from the proposed incinerator site. We don't want to be living in the shadow of the incinerator and breathing the air that's polluted every day. My daughter's just started in Year 7 at a local secondary school, and so will be in the area for at least the next 5 years. We couldn't afford to move, even if that wasn't a consideration. We also have the sewage works practically on our doorstep, and although the bad odours emanating from the site have been reduced over the last few years, they've in no way been eliminated. There are times when it's unbearable. That's depressing, and it's enough to have to live with. It's been noticed that when there's no wind to carry the air away from the sewage works, then the smell tends to build up to a distressing level in the immediate vicinity. The ground level of the area appears to act as a bowl to contain any emissions. This will be the case with any emission from the shortened chimney of the proposed incinerator, so the fumes we inhale will be even more intense and damaging to our health. I've also learned that the smallest particles created by biomass are currently ignored by EU regulation, but are now being implicated in increases in respiratory diseases, cardiovascular conditions, autoimmune response failure and dementia. That's not a situation that should be allowed to arise. The government recently issued a statement regarding the need to reduce CO2 emissions. I understand that biomass facilities emit greater quantities of CO2 emissions from the chimney than coal-burning power plants. This technology, therefore, appears to be in conflict with the government's vision for the future. Traffic in our area is now so bad that there are times when we don't consider attempting to travel. When we try to visit relatives living on the other side of the Manchester Ship Canal, the traffic is often prohibitive. Over the last 15 years, we've seen the arrival of the Trafford Centre, Asda, the Chill Factory, David Lloyd, the Soccer Dome, hotels, Salford Red Stadium and a large retail park, all off junctions 10 and 9 of the M60 motorway. Planning permission has now also been given for a hotel and a large supermarket. And I've just learned about Peel's new plans for a theme park. The infrastructure of the roads is virtually unchanged in all that time. There's only so much that the area can take, and we're already operating way beyond its capacity. There's no room for the additional 550 movements of transport each week that would be necessary if the proposed incinerator is built. Please do not let this happen. A recent media report showed that the Peel Group does not always demonstrate a good attitude to safety. They failed to put up warning signs to ensure that cyclists did not use a section of towpath along the section of stretch of the Bridgewater Canal which they own, where a cyclist drowned in September last year. The warning signs were still missing almost a year after the accident. When asked by the coroner at the inquest for the reason that the signs had not yet been put in place, the canal manager for Peel Investments simply said, "I don't have a reason." With this example of an extremely low level of concern for public safety, I'm extremely concerned that the group could be allowed to be in control of an incinerator where shortfalls in safety will have major implications for both the public and the operators. I attended the inquiry on the first day and was very aware that Mr Kingston was attempting to discredit the feeling of the public following a remark by Mr Walton. Mr Walton was reviewing a document which was inconsistent and hence misleading. He made the comment that he was struggling to follow the logic in the document because of this inconsistency, and it would be hard for the public to follow. Mr Kingston pounced on the opportunity to imply that the public could not fully understand the documentation submitted by Peel, and that was the reason for the fear of the proposed plant, not because the proposed plant was actually dangerous to health. For the record, Mr Kingston, and I'm only raising this because of that insinuation, I hold a first-class honours degree in maths. I've worked in engineering consultancy for 20 years and I'm a lead safety engineer. I, and all the people I've discussed the proposed plant with, are fully aware of the dangers of the plant. We're scared, not because we're unable to understand that proposal, but because from independent research we know that the pollutants discharged from the too short chimney will be extremely hazardous to health. Please, Inspector, do not impose this plant on us because you think that there is some truth in Mr Kingston's insinuation. I also understand from what we heard from Mr Walton on the first day of the inquiry that some of the calculations submitted by Peel to the Environment Agency regarding the emission concentration modelling were inaccurate and resulted in optimistic results. I'll presume that this was due to a genuine error and a lack of quality assurance procedures in the company that performed the calculations, rather than a deliberate attempt to hide the truth. I truly hope that the Inspector has the power to request that these calculations are corrected and resubmitted in order to ensure that the Environment Agency has based its decision on correct information. If this is not done, then what confidence can we have in the Environment Agency and its decisions made to protect our health? Our town has so much to recommend it. Fantastic schools, leisure centres, parks, outdoor recreation areas, football pitches and sports clubs. What we don't have is clean air to breathe. Surely that is a basic human right. Please do not make an already bad situation much, much worse for all the people who are here. Thank you.
Thank you. Pennington, Steve Pennington. Mr. Pennington, not here? No, it doesn't look like it. Mr. Evans, Mr. Kenneth Evans.
Mr. Richards, I do have several copies. Should I distribute them?
Well, if you give them to Michelle at the back, it just means that I don't need to take notes, which is helpful. Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And again, I apologise for going over many points which have already been raised, but I think at this stage I have no choice. I will try and be brief on a lot of the points. My name's Kenneth Evans, and I'm 65 years old, and together with my...
Sorry, did you say Trevor? Kenneth, yeah, I've got you down to Kenneth, yeah.
And together with my wife, I've lived on Benbecular Way for over 40 years. And again, hopefully people are familiar with where Benbecular Way is. It runs adjacent to the M60 at Junction Town. It's very close to Stromer Gardens, which has been mentioned many times during the discussions here. Now, I'd just like to very briefly go and dismiss a few points which have been raised many times, and one of them relates to, I would say, not in your backyard syndrome. Now, in the 40 years that I've actually lived at Benbecular Way, the residents there have seen the upgrading of the original Eccles bypass to the M63 motorway. This was followed by the addition of an extra motorway lane to create the M60. We've also seen the opening of the Trafford Centre on what was agricultural land with pleasant woodland walks. And we've lived alongside the Davyhulme sewage works for at least 35 out of those 40 years, was the source of obnoxious odours, which resulted in having to live with closed windows and restricted time in our gardens. And again, a very historical point which Mr. Wrigley raised earlier this week. At one time we did have heavy traffic on the minor roads travelling to Carrington. This is prior to construction of the Carrington Spur. And really I only raise those examples to show that lots of things have happened in our backyard. And I'd like to add that obviously whilst some objections were made to those proposals, they were largely accepted by the local residents who recognised the needs for a viable motorway system and the jobs generated by the Trafford Centre. I think we also accept the presence of the sewerage work, but obviously not the smells. And I just wonder if the sewerage work saga could have some unpleasant parallels with the proposed biomass plant proposal, in that it obviously when the sewerage work was put there, it obviously ticked all the right planning and environmental boxes, but the smell issue took 35 years to sort out, during which time the residents were continually assured that the air quality met all the European standards, rather like the assurances been given by the EPA and the other agencies regarding this proposed development. And as I say, I know I'm gilding the lily, but the main point I'm making is that local residents accept change when the reasons are sound, We've even, as I say, accepted the sewerage works. And again, could I just say in passing, which I'm sure Mr. Richards will look at, we accept the sewerage works location, and at least they did actually use the canal facilities. Now, I noticed in the appeal proposal they again cite the canal as a possible means of transporting raw material in and out. And I just wonder whether that's to make the proposal seem more environmentally friendly. The other thing I've noticed over the week that I've been attending here is that at the moment people do not have an agreed plan to use the excess heat generated from the plant, but have mentioned that they're in confidential discussions with other business on that site. Now again, as been mentioned this morning, the other businesses on that site consist of 4 sports-related leisure centres, several cafes and bars and a hotel. And I can't help imagining that those businesses are more concerned about losing customers who don't want to take physical exercise or spend their leisure time in the shadow of the biomass plant, rather than obtaining possible cheaper alternative heating for the 90% of the time that it will be available from the plant. I also want to mention a further site-specific issue, and it's the claimed easy and ready access to the motorway system. As has been said, this section of the motorway must be amongst the most heavily congested in Manchester, and Junction 10 is often gridlocked with the slip roads and exit roads, especially along Trafford Boulevard towards the Trafford Centre. In actual fact, on many occasions, the motorway is standing traffic beyond my house on Benbecula Way. And the last point we'd like to make concerning motorway access is its use in relation that lorries, or the claim that lorries using the site will not be passing or exiting close to residential properties. Now, whilst this may be true for lorries entering from the plant from the north, it's certainly not when travelling from the south. The affected area extends far beyond the slip road at Stromer Gardens. I've already mentioned the occurrence of standing traffic from time to time along Benbecula Way, which is only separated from the motorway boundary by a residential road. The same applies to properties on Harris Avenue, Shetland and Iona Way, and even when you follow the motorway perimeter as it leaves my estate heading towards Sale, there are similar properties on Lostock Road and Mossvale Road. And again, I would humbly suggest that if at all possible, the inspector actually walks along the M60 perimeter roads from Stromer Gardens to Mossvale Road, especially at peak times, to gain a clear picture of what this involves. Again, I'd just like to quickly dismiss before I get to the main point of my objection, which is on health grounds, is the suggestion that the Breathe Clean Air Group have led the local residents by the nose on this matter, and I think this is really just an insult to the intelligence and integrity of not only the residents, but also the councillors and MPs that stand shoulder to shoulder in opposing this development. Now, again, before proceeding, I'd just like to give a little bit of information about my background. I'm a retired senior research chemist, and I worked for ICI, which later became part of AstraZeneca for 35 years as a specialist in separation science. And I've authored or co-authored some 12 scientific papers. Now, I'm only offering this information purely to point out that I have a scientific background, and that my particular field of analytical chemistry gives me an understanding of the techniques used to measure the toxic pollutants emitted from the proposed biomass facility. Now, whilst I have little expertise in the area of environmental science, I do appreciate the large amount of theoretical and academic research that has been applied to try and establish the health risks involved in this proposal. In fact, I would be prepared to say it's the best available, but I don't know that. But having said this, I contend that due to the many assumptions that by necessity have had to be made, and the constantly changing variables involved in these calculations, that surely common sense dictates that we should not site this development so close to my and many other homes. To begin with, it's necessary to use a model to make predictions on the levels of pollutants and the risk to health. I believe that in this case a model recently developed by Cambridge University is being used. Now, again, does this imply that Davyhulme and Urmston residents will be the proving ground for this model? Now, again, earlier this week I did hear that I think Mr. Oldham visited a site where this model had been used and found that it was largely in agreement with the predicted values. But I'm not sure if we asked a statistician about the confidence limit of one data point, that he'd give us very much confidence that implied that there would be no problem at every site. Now, we've also heard from Chelmsford Council expert witnesses that using different models in specific instances could result in different predicted levels. Other required inputs for the model have been typical weather conditions for this area over the past 4 years. Now, we all know how erratic and unpredictable our weather conditions have become, so this, to me, is a further cause for concern. There's also been considerable debate and dispute during the inquiry on the position of the sampling tubes and monitoring stations used to gather information for the model. Again, I'm concerned about the inputted levels of pollutants which are fed into the model, which are claimed to be typical for this type of installation. Now, we're told typical, even though we're led to believe that the type of waste we're being used can vary quite widely in its chemical composition. And lastly, I have great concerns on the levels of plant control and the analytical testing regime that will be employed. I cannot simply accept statements that the EPA or appropriate body knows best, and the testing protocols that they will follow will result in no risk to health. It's simply not possible to continuously monitor every one of the wide range of pollutants generated and in turn have some sort of automated fail-safe shutdown when these levels are exceeded. Now, a specific example I would make in this respect is the measurement of dioxin levels. Whilst online monitors are being developed for this assay, currently the offline measurements which are used for these highly toxic carcinogens is extremely time-consuming, involving combined gas chromatography and high-resolution mass spectrometry. Now, I understand it's believed to monitor these pollutants on a quarterly basis, in which case do we just hope or assume that the levels in between are okay? I would further like to raise the possibility of dioxins and other pollutants entering into residents' bodies via the food chain. I'm Secretary of Mossvale Allotment, one of 8 allotment sites in Urmston. We have 60 plots on our particular allotment, and I would estimate that there must be well over 400 plots in the Urmston area, providing fruit and vegetables for more than 1,000 people. That 1,000 people is quite conservative. Now, many of my plot owners have indicated that they will give up their plots rather than risk growing contaminated produce caused by the deposition or soil contamination of pollutants from the biomass plant. Now, the last thing I'd like to raise about my concerns from the science point of view is the definition and use of regulatory limits for classified pollutants. In this submission, the hypothetical or projected values of pollutants are contrasted with the maximum permitted levels specified by the regulators. I accept that's all that we can do. But first, I think it's important to bear in mind that even though the submission documents contain table after table of pollutant levels, these are not real values. It's impossible that they can be, all having been derived from the modelling. Secondly, that what is set as a maximum permitted level for a pollutant today can and has changed over time. And we've also heard from expert witnesses at this inquiry, and I refer to the medical expert who spoke earlier this week, that even using the numbers generated by the model can have a serious effect on health. So, whilst it may be felt that I've taken a far too simplistic and laboured approach in dealing with my health concerns, I believe these are the issues of most concern to residents, giving rise to the perceived risk to health of this proposal. I also do not think that my concerns are wholly at odds with the statement made by the Health Protection Agency Chief Executive, which I've appended to my document, who when describing a new incinerator, and I quote a key sentence in his statement, where he says that this is that while it is not possible to rule out adverse health from a modern, well-regulated municipal waste incinerator with complete certainty, I think complete certainty, any potential damage to health of those living close by is likely to be small, likely, not definitive. And I really do hope that I don't have to explain to my grandchildren or they to their offspring that we use the best science available, but unfortunately we got it wrong. Now, in closing, I firmly believe there are risks that we take every day that can be justified because of economic or lifestyle choices. I cannot, however, see any justification for taking any health risks, no matter how small, by locating the proposed biomass plant so close to a populated residential area, especially when the proposed site is unsuitable from several other considerations, all of which have been highlighted during this inquiry. I also believe it's the government's responsibility to safeguard the public from potential threats to their health whenever possible, i.e. the ban on smoking in public places. If in the national interest we need to have this type of power generating plant, it should be situated well away from populated areas, which still can give it adequate motorway links. And I think this is especially true while so much environmental controversy exists. I conclude that there's no justification for siting this biomass plant in the proposed location, and I implore the Inspector and the Minister of State to uphold the wishes of the residents, the councillors and MPs in rejecting the application. Thank you.
Give copies to Michelle. Mr. Howard Munson, please. Good afternoon.
So, my name is Howard Munson. I am a resident of Davyhulme, living on the housing development which is situated just behind Stromer Gardens, which I understand you have visited. I've lived there for over 40 years. I'm a professionally qualified electrical engineer, having worked for both the Central Electricity Generating Board and Post Office Telecommunications on power generation plants. Having attended several sessions of this inquiry, I have listened to the various arguments around which report, which sampling point, or regulatory body is relevant or not. Yet, there appears to have been little or no debate over the fundamental issue, the actual need for such a development in Davyhulme. The primary purpose of the plant is as an incinerator for recycled or reclaimed wood. We heard in the early days of the inquiry that this fuel would come from various sources and locations. The locations, we were told, were all over the northwest of England and the rest of the country. Mr. Watson said in his submissions that due now to a real threat that there would be a shortage of this type of fuel, it could even be that we had to have it imported. In the light of this, it is clear that there is an insufficient supply of such materials in the immediate locality, all fuel having to be transported into the area. This, I suggest, indicates that there is not a need for an incinerator to burn recycled or reclaimed wood in the Davyhulme area. The plant has also been described by Peel as a renewable energy plant, supplying power. If you look at the actual plans of the plant, it becomes clear that it is in fact a waste incinerator with a small amount of generation added to the end of the process to alter the perception of the plant. The 20 megawatt electrical generation quoted has to be netted off against the power consumption of the plant itself. Depending on actual plant design in terms of ancillary equipment and efficiency, this will reduce to well below 20 megawatts the output of the plant. Also, as Mr. Oaten mentioned, the plant could be shut down for 10% of its possible operating time. So, the total output available for export will be considerably less than that quoted as the installed capacity. This also has to be looked at in the context of the new gas-fired dedicated power station to be built a couple of miles along the Ship Canal at Carrington. This is a modern, new technology, clean plant with a 75-metre stack, which meets all emission criteria, has received planning permission without a reaction from the local community necessitating a public inquiry. The new power station has an output of 880 megawatts, will supply 1 million homes and contribute 6% of the total UK energy needs. With such a modern clean plant making a contribution of more than 44 times that of the incinerator plant, there is again not a need locally or indeed nationally for the Davyhulme incinerator plant in terms of power generation. Turning to air quality and levels of oxides of nitrogen, Peel seem to think that the statement they have made several times during the course of this inquiry when referring to these criteria, and I quote, "No significant increase is sufficient mitigation." Sir, since Peel Holdings began developing the area between junctions 9 and 10 of the M60 motorway in the late 1990s, we have had the Trafford Centre, extensions to the Trafford Centre, the Barton Square development, the Chill Factor, other leisure centres and a hotel. Not to mention planning permission having already been granted to Peel Holdings for another 62-metre high, 15-storey hotel at Junction 10 and a supermarket opposite Stromer Gardens. It's perhaps interesting that the hotel happens to be 1.5 times the height of the proposed incinerator stack. In every application, the same phrase has been used by Peel Holdings with regard to air quality and pollution. No significant increase. Sir, how many no significant increases does it take to make a significant increase? We already know that we live in an air quality management zone with some of the worst air quality and levels of oxides of nitrogen in the country.
I don't want to stop you, but again, this is a point that's been made.
Yes, I'm only going to mention this briefly, which I say is already in breach of European law in regard of air quality standards. It is all these incremental, no significant increases that have taken us to this unacceptable state of affairs, and enough is enough. So on the grounds of air quality, levels of oxides of nitrogen, of the high degree of perceived danger to public health, this development is yet again not needed in Davyhulme. Therefore, on 3 highly significant levels, disposal of reclaimed or recycled wood, power generation, air quality management, there is no need for this development, and I would ask you, sir, to give due regard to the lack of need for such a development in a densely populated urban area when you are considering your decision, and to reject the appeal. Thank you, sir.
Kathleen Orr.
My name is Kathleen Orr, and I live on Woodhouse Road, Davyhulme. I've been a resident in the area since 1967, and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be sitting here today. But having come here last week on the first 2 days of this inquiry, I felt obliged, and I was so angry, I felt I needed to speak. I'm speaking also on behalf of my family. Inspector, at this stage in the inquiry, some of my concerns have already been raised, so I'll briefly just gloss over those. The location built next to the air quality management area, the pollutants already exceeding acceptable levels, additional emissions from extra slow-moving HGVs, the daily M60 traffic congestion spilling over onto our residential roads, spreading further pollution, flawed computer modelling software never investigated, the emissions monitoring process contravening EU law, the Environment Agency checks are pre-advised, the conflict of interest which determine the stack height, experimental technology and design, the proposed source of wood is unsustainable, misleading artist's impression, which did not indicate the huge size of the plant, and, as previous people have said, cumulative effect of the additional approved developments at junctions 9 and 10, supermarkets, office blocks, hotel, more commercial buildings, even more office block houses, and then to add to this, recently this week approved extension to Port Salford on the other side of the canal at Cadiz Head and Earle. 12 points. This list alone is very worrying. So when in recent days I heard that there had been an explosion at a biomass incinerator in Angen in Holland, and residents were told to stay indoors because of the risk of toxic outfall from the blast, my worst fears were realised, especially as the Barton incinerator is to be located so close to a methane plant. It could all go off like a giant bomb. Then there would be no residents left to complain, and Peel could be developed the whole area at will. The Environment Agency is incapable of protecting us. When I went to the second consultation meeting, the representatives I spoke to were embarrassed and apologetic. Not only is their monitoring system flawed, but they said that their licensing remit did not allow them to consider the increased traffic congestion and additional pollution. They said it was a planning issue. I disagree. I quote from Environment Agency Corporate Plan 2011 to 2015. Our fundamental purpose, protecting and improving the environment for people and wildlife. Going a little further on, we believe we can do it and do it well. It will involve being more efficient, committing to the big society and localism approaches championed by the UK government, and working with partner organisations and communities. We will need to stop doing some of the things we've done in the past, but we must keep a high level of ambition so we can do even more to create a better place for people and the environment. The officer who granted this permit certainly did not read the corporate plan. For 32 years, I taught young children at a local primary school in Flixton. When I first started teaching there, not one child had an asthma inhaler, and it stayed that way for many years. When I left 8 years ago, 25% of the children in my class were using an inhaler of some sort. I had a box in my classroom full of them. I carried them to PE. I took them out in the playground. We took them out on visits to other places. That is very significant. My own daughter used one, but when she moved out of the area, she no longer needed it. Last year, I made a grave error. I put my 15-month-old granddaughter in her buggy and went for a walk. As we approached Junction 10 by Stromer Gardens, I realised that not only were we breathing the pollution, I could actually taste it. I've not taken her there again, and I never, ever will. If this is the background level, then I dread to think what it will be like if this incinerator is built. This plant will have a licence to operate for 25 years. This is potentially a 25-year licence to experiment with our health. It is significant that the Health Protection Agency have commissioned a new review into the effects of incinerators on the health of nearby populations. The technology at this plant will be out of date before it is built. Trends show that the proposed wood source is unsustainable. What will Peel Energy burn then? Well, my experience of the Davyhulme residents and my knowledge of Peel's reputation leads me to conclude that Peel Energy is not to be trusted. Peel is very good at changing protected clauses and making failed promises, like, I quote...
I did ask people to be careful about making allegations that they find difficult to substantiate, and remember that you are on the web.
Okay.
This is being broadcast.
Okay. I think we've all experienced the state-of-the-art traffic management system around the Trafford Centre. Local names have cleverly been changed and some have disappeared. To name this plant Barton and call the retail park at Junction 10 Trafford Retail Park was a stroke of genius. By implication to an outside observer, it could appear that the residential area of Davyhulme no longer exists. Why is it so important to Peel that this location is next to the canal? Wood from the northwest is more likely to come by road transport. Could it be that when the wood runs out, Peel can ship in waste from other countries? I am very afraid for the health of myself, my family, my friends, and all the residents in the area. When I retired, I thought I'll be able to go for walks, spend more time at the local David Lloyd Health Club, sit in my garden, and plant vegetables with my grandchildren. Instead, I will be a prisoner in my own home. I cannot sleep for thinking about it. It is on my mind all the time. When I look out of the window, I visualise where it might be. I ask myself, will I still be able to see the trees in the distance, or will I see this heavy industrial plant? It is already causing tension in my household because I'm always talking about it. The democratic system has failed us before. The result has been congested roads and the decline of our town centre. It became so bad that an air quality management area was established, and Trafford Council highlighted the town for regeneration. This long-awaited regeneration has only just started and is fragile. It is nowhere near finished. We want businesses and new families to settle here. If this BREP were to go ahead, the negative effect would discourage businesses and destroy this community. Already, the for sale boards are appearing, and the huge incentives which were offered at the Barton Cross developments in Davyhulme will no longer have any appeal. The community of Ernston, Flixton and Davyhulme is very mixed both demographically and socio-economically. But what binds us together is that we care. We have aspirations for our children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren and future generations. Our priorities are their health, their environment and the future prosperity of the area. We are once again, Inspector, putting our trust in democracy and localism, and I appeal to you that you recommend the Secretary of State that he uphold the democratic decision made by Trafford Council.
Thank you, Mrs. Dole.
Thank you, Inspector, for allowing me to speak today. I'm Councillor Alan Mitchell. I'm, for my sins, Executive Member for Highways and the Environment here in Trafford. I must start by saying I share the concerns of and some of the anxieties that we've heard expressed today in respect to the proposed location of the biomass incinerator in Davyhulme. The population is rightly, I think, worried concerning the risks to their health and their safety. I recall many, many years ago, back in the 70s and 80s, when we had another incinerator in Trafford, down in Broadheath, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. It was built to the standards of the day. It was highly commended by the experts of the time. It was found to be subsequently to be wanting in extreme measure, and it was eventually closed down, thank goodness. We now have a proposal before us to site a biomass incinerator in what is already one of Trafford's lowest air quality areas. The proposed location has so many inherent problems. Barton Airport, restricting the chimney heights, preventing the proper dispersion of pollutants. The adjacence of the air quality management area, where pollution levels are so significant they are already having impact on people's health. And we've had many speakers talk of that today. Not mentioned yet, at least during my presence here, is the difficulty of delivering fuel to the biomass plant itself through what is an extremely congested area already. Why would you choose to site this plant in the middle of such an urban area when so many alternative sites would not pose these fundamental difficulties? We already have approved within the area such works as the Davyhulme biogas generators, Port Salford development, the Western Gateway. These will all have their own impacts on the area's air quality. People are rightly concerned because they know that pollution is already at levels that affect their health. In addition to the independent science questioning biomass incineration itself, for many people, the promised air improvements will have no prospect of being realised. In addition, we know that the health effects from incineration are very complex and are not yet fully understood. Many of you will recall, many of the locals will recall the difficulties we've had with United Utilities with a very serious odour problem in the area. The council worked with them for a number of years in order to combat this problem, but it caused huge stress and anxiety at that time. I greatly fear that this proposal would be 1,000 times worse for the area than what was merely the stench from the sewage works. The regeneration of this area is dominated by the regional shopping complex, a number of other high-quality proposals. The biomass incinerator can only be detrimental to the future of quality regeneration and the image of this area. I personally have a great regret that the developer did not take up the council's offer of assistance to find a suitable, safe site for this development. Sir, I implore you, support the views of the council and of the people of Trafford and refuse this plant. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I've got a couple, well, I've got actually 4 more speakers, I think. I'm happy to continue, but I think we might take a short break, 15 minutes. Is that going to be enough, or would you rather take a proper break for lunch? Sorry? We'd rather carry on. Rather carry on, okay. If we can just take a short break, maybe 10 minutes. And then, thank you very much. Thank you. If you can leave your document with Michelle. take a short break of 10.